And hi, everybody.
Hope you're all having a nice Tuesday evening.
Almost every weekend it snowed.
All right, we'll give it another couple more minutes to see if anyone comes on in.
Come on.
I'm going to be sharing my screen throughout this. I'm going to share into the chat a PowerPoint with you all. There will be a few times where there will be opportunities to engage with the PowerPoint, so I'll have it open for editing access if you all want to participate that way. Otherwise, you can just participate through the chat, and when we speak and unmute ourselves and all that. But since I'll be sharing my screen, I won't be able to view the chat. So just if anything pops up, one of you all would be able to just unmute yourself and let me know, like Michaela or Sunny, if one of you guys would be able to interrupt if there's something important in the chat. Cool. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, we're streaming live now.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing it.
All right. Oopsies. I'm thinking you all should be able to see this, correct? It says 3 Denver transportation. Perfect. Let me get the link right now to put it into the chat. Oh, actually, would one of you guys be able to put it into the chat? I can't when I'm, oh, I can. Never mind. Cool.
There you go.
Perfect.
Now we're all doxxed. Please don't sign us up for any junk mail. I already get plenty.
Yeah. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Today we are continuing on the conversation from last month's meeting on transportation and mobility. So last month we had Kevin Matthews from YIMBY come in and Chris Miller from Denver Bicycle Lobby coming in and talking about transportation and mobility, meaning like bikeability, walkability, wheelchair accessibility within the Denver metro area. So why is this important? Transportation is, at least how it's recorded by our state, is the largest source of greenhouse gas pollution and the leading cause of air pollution in Colorado and nationwide. Our current transit patterns, which is basically single occupant, predominantly gas cars, within an auto-dependent landscape, hugely contributes to climate change, the city heat island effect, land use changes, health and safety, and justice and equity concerns, and many other issues. In contrast, when cities prioritize clean, affordable, accessible public transit and mobility options, the environment's better, the local economy, people's health and safety, justice and equity, all these things are protected. And there's also improved quality of life. So like, I'm not speaking for everyone, but I know that I myself am happiest when I'm living in a place where I don't have to rely on a car and I could use public transit or walk or bike wherever I need to go. So moving into the agenda, it's 6:05 about right now. So, oh, I just noticed it's not actually showing the whole slide. There you go. We're first going to discuss, there'll be a little bit of like a lecture type thing in the first 20 minutes or so, where we'll be going over current issues as it relates to transit and mobility in the Denver metro area, and also some different transit and mobility plans laid out by the state and the city and the county. And then we'll open up to a Q&A, and then we'll have 2 different breakout group sessions where we'll come together to discuss which issues we see as most important, and then also which solutions we see as most excitable and impactful. Come together and we'll close out for the night, and hopefully we'll be able to be finished by 8 o'clock so y'all can rest and watch Netflix or whatever you like to do in your evenings. Oh, and then even though, yeah, we will have Q&A, if you have any questions that pop up, feel free to put them in the chat throughout, or just any observations or comments that you have. All right, so we saw this graphic last week where it's basically showing the amount of space taken up by the different modes of transit. So if everyone drove their own car, which is how it typically is, versus taking public transit and versus biking. And then also obviously the people would be the space taken up by pedestrians. So right now, 73% of Denver commuters drive alone. United stateswide, 76%. So we're like slightly better than the national average, but not much. And there's a lot of reasons why this is a problem. So of course, it's a huge greenhouse gas emitter. It contributes to the worsening air problem here in the state. It's also really loud. It's resource intensive. It takes a lot of land, where most of the time the car is parked, like 90% of the time the car is parked, and it's taking up space that it could instead be a bike lane or sidewalks or a public transit route or a community garden or whatever that space could be better used for. It's also really expensive. Transportation, whether it's like car payments or gas, is like the second biggest way that people spend their household income after housing. And, it's also really problematic because when cities are designed with this implicit rule that you need a car in order to get around, it pushes out people who don't have access to a car, whether they can't afford it or whatever the case might be. So they have then unequal access to job opportunities. And there was a really powerful quote I heard the other day of access to transportation is access to opportunity. And a lot of people want these alternatives, but there's so many barriers right now, systematic barriers, like 40% of Denver sidewalks are, or 40% of Denver blocks either don't have sidewalks, or their sidewalks are so broken down, or they're too narrow for folks who are in wheelchairs or using strollers. A lot of the Denver bikeways and public transit routes just go in and out of the city center or maybe within the core of the city, but they don't really go suburb to suburb, even though the majority of people's transit routes and commuting routes are actually suburb to suburb. And they're not really placed in a way that's convenient for people to get where they need to go or where they want to go, whether that be work, school, healthcare, entertainment, recreation, all these things. And it's also, there's huge discrepancies based off of, for instance, like in communities of color and low-income communities, they're much less likely to be able to have an accessible public transit route, especially one that comes frequently and regularly. And then there's also issues of being physically inaccessible or having the sense that it's not safe to ride, bike, take public transit alone at nighttime, things like that, especially if you're from a minoritized group. All right, so this was from a study by a research team in Toronto. It's not showing all public transit routes, but it is showing the reliable transit routes, meaning buses that come or public transit that comes every 30 minutes until midnight, 7 days a week. And as you can see in the Denver one, it's really just these branches coming in and out of the city and maybe a few in the city center, but there isn't this like tight grid of suburb to suburb, which is what's really needed. And versus in the Toronto map, you can see that there is that tight grid. And for that reason, people do use public transit much more regularly than in Denver. All right, so hearing through that, this is the opportunity for you to come into the PowerPoint. I see a lot of folks already in here. I see all the little pictures up at the top. And I want you to all grab a star and drag it to whichever of these bubbles you see as something that concerns you most about our current public our transportation and mobility system. So for instance, if like the air pollution problem and climate impact is the most important, put it here. You could also do a few different ones if there are several different competing interests. And I'll put a question in the chat. Let me see. It's kind of harder using the chat when you're in presentation mode. I didn't think through that. I see a lot of folks already in here. And so cost could be like the cost of car, cost of using public transit, cost of switching to EV. For safety and comfort, I was thinking about like, do you feel safe driving, taking the bus, walking, biking? In terms of convenience and accessibility, does it go where you need it to go? Is it coming regularly? And in terms of personal health, I was kind of thinking about like access to recreational opportunities or using movement to get to as part of your daily commute, and that sort of health aspect. So if anyone was confused as to what some of those meant. Cool. So I see the biggest ones as convenience and accessibility, and air pollution, environmental impact, and climate impact. And I also see some stars based off time. So the time it takes to get to where you need to go in terms of using these different systems. This is really cool. And you have access to this. So if you want, you're more than welcome to come back in and add stars to wherever you want to next. I'm going to move forward to the next slide. All right, so as I previously stated, 73% of Denver commuters drive alone. So they're here in this bottom of this triangle. A few of those 73% might be driving an electric car, but the majority of people are driving a gas-powered car. Only about 6% live up here in this walking and biking terrain. About 6% use public transit for their daily commute, and 15% use some other form of transit, whether that be car sharing or carpooling or telecommuting or anything like that. And we really need to flip this on its head. Like it's not good and sustainable for our communities or for the environment for the majority of people to be using their own single occupant car. We need to make sure that there are more people using these alternative forms of transportation and mobility options. So there's another opportunity for you all to come in and grab a star, move it to the solutions and the modes of transit that most excite you. Feel free to do as many as you would like as well. And I'll try to put it back into the chat as well, this question, for folks who want to type it in. Very cool. I love all the engagement. I see a ton of stars on biking and walking and public transit. So those like ideal forms of solution. So it's basically like the hierarchy of like, you can see like the ones higher up on the triangle are like the more ideal solutions and they have the largest impacts. And then we also see some on like carpooling and electric vehicles. And I think that's also a really great solution and convenient for a lot of people's lives if the other forms of transit don't work for them. Cool. I'm going to move forward. All right. So in cities and towns that prioritize these alternative modes of transportation in terms of their actual city structure and infrastructure, people's behaviors change. So people stop driving as much and people rely on more public transit, biking, and walking. And on the top and bottom are some terms that often describe these types of communities where they're like multimodal forms of transportation, transit-oriented, human-centered, 15-minute neighborhoods where you have access to everything that you really need to on a daily basis for work, school, entertainment, all these sort of things within a 15-minute walk. And then another related term that isn't on here is the concept of like mixed mode development and zoning, which is more on the land use side of putting, for instance, like apartment complexes on top of cafes or grocery stores or other places of work and recreation, so that things are more accessible and are really facilitation or the use of transportation and mobility solutions, because all those things are within. Denver originally was designed in that way. So we were set up on a grid, at least in the main city center of Denver. This is a recreation of the original streetcar route. So during the first like half of Denver's history, most people use streetcars to get around. And you could see how it's really well connected. And some of our like really vibrant streets that we still have, whether it's like East Colfax or Broadway or South Pearl Street, are kind of like the legacy of this previous streetcar history, even if they're not as well connected anymore now that we've really sprawled out in terms of our suburbs. But it personally gives me a lot of hope because it makes me think of like, we originally were designed this way. And yes, we've changed quite a bit and grown so much, but we have the backbones to be able to return or like move forward into a more transit oriented community. And that really will support these like local vibrant neighborhoods. There are a lot of statewide and city and countywide efforts to address Denver Metro's transportation, mobility, and land use problems and envision a better future. This is a revisioning of East Colfax, where they've added some tree canopy to provide shade during the hot summer months, added more bus lanes, walking paths. I don't see any bike lanes, which I think is a huge loss in this image, but overall it's a much better version of current East Colfax. On the state level, Governor Polis, and also there's the greenhouse gas pollution reduction roadmap, which is still in the works at the moment, has put forward some goals to reduce transportation's impact on greenhouse gas emissions, but they're largely focused on the adoption of EV or electric vehicle usage for like government vehicles, personal vehicles, and heavy duty trucks. And they have a theoretical goal of like reducing the number of miles traveled and people who are driving alone, but they don't have a clear policy or plan to make this happen. They're mostly pushing it forward to the local governments to increase adoption of the public transit and mobility options instead. It's not too late to make the state accountable for that. It's in their purview. So here are some of the city and county plans. So in 2017, the city and county of Denver put forth a mobility action plan to change our existing transit commute patterns. So moving it from 73% of people who drive alone to instead of 50% who drive alone, and increasing adoption of these alternatives instead. The following year, the city and county also released the 80 by 50 plan, which included those mobility action plan goals, but the rest of the plan was really focused on increasing EV, but they also had a 2050 goal, which was exciting, of 100% carbon-free public transit by 2050. So at least that was in there. And then the final plan I wanted to share with you all was in 2019, Denver released the Denver Wright Comprehensive Plan, which was a mix of transportation and land use planning. Within the Denver Moves portion of the Denver Wright's plan, they included specific plans around transit, pedestrian and trails, and bicycles, with a kind of a broad, non-specific goal of creating this like comprehensive network of bike paths and pedestrian paths, improving our sidewalks, making public transit more frequent, efficient, higher capacity, more comfortable, having a sense of community at transit stops, and more affordable for folks, with a 2040 goal of having 75% of households within a quarter mile of a frequent transit network bus, which is a really great goal, because most people will be able to take public transit if it's that close. It's like a 10-15 minute walk to their house. And this is kind of those Denver Wright plans coming together, incorporating some of the land use changes, some adding green spaces and tree canopies, and making things, oh, look at that. Sorry, I'll put this over to the side. Increasing the different transit routes and connections with the different biking and walking trails. And then my final thing before we move into the Q&A section, I know it was so much information, but I wanted to like preload everything before we go on into our breakout groups. Here are just some like super broad stroke examples of some ways that we can move forward and advance transportation and mobility in the Denver Metro. So we could like look at some of those plans that I presented on and just make sure that we're holding our decision makers accountable, or push for like closer and more near-term goals rather than like 2040 goals, 2030 goals that are a little bit more far away, or push them to go further. We could also, elect someone that would be a strong ally into an advisory board position. We can support transit-related legislation, like there's a potential bill coming up this legislative session trying to allow for transit-oriented development around RTD stops and ensure that RTD could lower their fares and increase parking prices so that more people could take public transit and it's more biker and pedestrian friendly rather than car friendly. We can focus on the different levels of that hierarchy in terms of like which modes of transit we want to focus on, if we want to focus on directly or if we want to focus it on indirectly through land use and zoning changes. Rather than that like top-down policy approach, we can also look at some bottom-up programs like bike sharing, having community-led shuttles that go to particular businesses or events, carpooling program. We can push for behavioral change to incentivize new modes of public transit, and that could also be like a policy-driven thing where they lower the fares, or employers provide subsidies to folks who use alternative transit modes. Or we can just push for the momentum that's happening right now already around COVID, where a lot of people are telecommuting to work. That's reducing the number of people on the road. A lot of lanes have been converted to bike lanes temporarily, and a lot of streets have become car-free streets temporarily, but we can push for them to make those into permanent changes and maybe even add more streets and lanes into that. So these are just a few examples, but this is really about you guys, and we wanted to know what gets you all excited and what gets you angry, what gets you invested in this topic. So before we move into the breakout groups, I wanted to take time to hear your questions, and I'll do my best, and the team will do our best to answer them to the best of our ability. So feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions.
Is telecommuting like when you go to work just through like Zoom or something, like virtual work?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of folks are doing that nowadays to either like fully or at least partially.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
I just threw a link in the chat. I would love to see some action on CDOT's plan. They have billions in highway expansion plan, and that's completely against everything and for reducing BMT in the climate roadmap. So maybe trying to push them to transitioning from highways to transit. And
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's like a very clear wrong that we can organize against right now and push them into the direction that actually is, regenerative for our communities. I agree.
sorry, that Indy, that was a VMT, vehicle miles traveled, and the greenhouse gas reduction roadmap, they call for a 10% reduction in VMT, but as you said, there's really no mandates in terms of making that happen.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Additional questions? All right. I'm going to move us into the breakout groups.
Guys, I guess since we're a small group, do we maybe just want to all talk together?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that works. Let me, sorry, I feel like you could probably, when it can, I don't know. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so to start, I wanted to first go around and get to know each other. So I can start, and we'll go around and say our name, preferred pronoun, and which mode of transportation describes you and why. So I'm Jessica Isaacs. I use she, her pronouns. And thinking about this, I think like a schoolie or converted cargo bus describes me most, because I like to live on the road and kind of change up my lifestyle and bring a sense of home with me wherever I go. So I'll pass it on to Andrew.
I'm Andrew. I forgot what the second prompt was already.
Pronoun,
he, him. And I was just saying before everybody jumped on how I keep hurting my legs. So I would be a razor scooter, so I can get around by my own power and also hit myself in the ankle occasionally. Do you want me to pass it? Sorry, I'm not doing great at this. Kim, go ahead.
Okay, hi. I'm Kim, and she, her. Let's see, what kind of transportation I would be? I think a bicycle, just because I really love the freedom of riding a bike and going places that some other people can't get to, and getting a little exercise as well. So let's see, I will jump to someone I don't know. How about Indy?
Hey everybody. So my name's Indy and I use the he, him, his pronouns. And my answer would be a lot like Kim's. I think Kim really hit the nail on the head with that answer. I would be a bike, and it's because you can go places and that other people can't go in cars, and you get that workout. So definitely I would be a bike. And then I would like to pass it to David.
Okay, I'm David, he, him, and I'm going to go with the crowd and say a bike because that is how I get to work. And if I could be a bike, I wouldn't have to worry about it being stolen when I lock it up at work. Oh, and I'll pass it on to Jolynn.
Hi, I'm Jolynn, and I've been with 350 for a while. I think I'd go with a bike as well. I mean, it's kind of a hard one for me. I like the convenience of my car in the sense, especially if I go to the grocery store and am transporting, 3 or 4 bags of groceries. But I realize that, that's not an everyday occurrence, and there are lots of places that I can go via mass transit to different meetings and everything. Let me pass it on to Jan. Jan, are you there? Jan Brown? Oh, hey. Well, let's do Margaret then. Margaret for Liz.
Welcome, Liz.
Yeah.
She's calling on you because we are doing introductions. Um,
Okay, I'm Liz, and I just found this link, so glad to be with you tonight from Denver and 350 Denver. So,
And Liz, what mode of transportation describes you and why? Like if your essence.
I'm a public transportation. I'm a big bus. If not walking.
Did I pick it up from her? It's Amy. Well, I'll pick it up. Yeah, so I'm Amy and I belong to 350 also. I'm a suburbanite, so I need to use a vehicle. I have a plug-in hybrid and it gets me everywhere without any gasoline because during the pandemic, I'm not going anywhere. So, yeah, that's my chosen. I'm old. I broke my foot, so I'm not going to go on a bike or take a bus or anything like that. Nothing near me. So I have to get in my car to get places.
I'm trying to help.
Who do I pass it on to? Heidi, or wait, Heidi? Is there a Heidi?
Yes, I'm Heidi. I use she, her pronouns. And I think I would be a bike. It feels independent, and whenever I get on a bike, it makes me feel like a kid again. Oh, I will pass it to Michaela.
Good evening, all of you. My name is Micaela Ironshore Dominguez. I'm also a part of 350 Denver. I'm the team coordinator. Happy to be here with all of you speaking about transportation, super exciting. If I were to choose what I would be transportation wise, I'm going to change it up a little bit. Even though I know this wouldn't work really well here in the Denver metro area, sadly, but I would love to be a canoe because I love to be in the water, near the water. And so, yeah, that's how I would love to get around. And I will pass it to Sunny. Oh, before, I want to thank all of you for that just joined us. We're doing introductions. And so if we call on you, please introduce yourself and then please describe what mode of transportation describes you and why. Thanks. Sunny, it's all you.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I'm Sunny Benoit, she, her pronouns. I live in one of those 15-minute neighborhoods and I walk and bike everywhere. So I would be a high-speed bullet train. They're electric, and then I could go to the mountains really fast. And I will pass it to David. Oh, there's two David. David F.
The other David. I'm David F. I use he, him pronouns. And I'm actually going to pick walking as my mode of transportation, which is maybe not as fun to imagine, but I have a big dog and I like to go places with him and he has lots of energy. So walking is a really good way to burn off his energy. And now's the fun game of who hasn't gone yet.
Maybe Kevin.
Yeah, I have not gone yet. Hi, my name's Kevin Matthews. I'm with UMB Denver. I was here last month doing the presentation. I use he, him pronouns. And so 3 years ago, I bought off of Craigslist from a guy in my neighborhood a cargo bike, which is awesome. And I use it basically to bring my son around the neighborhood, which he's starting to almost age out of. But the other good thing is I can go to Trader Joe's and do my grocery shopping. It usually fits about 3-4 bags of groceries before it gets overloaded. So I would go with the bike. Is there anyone else to pass it to? I'm not sure who hasn't gone.
I'm Jan Brown. I'm a member of 350. And I'm going to get me a hydrogen fuel cell car. And I'm going to use that to get around.
If you haven't gone, just jump in.
I've already gone. I'm Joan Lynn. She's got my name there.
Then don't jump in.
Thank you. Alex and Amy.
Amy went already too, so you can cross me out.
That's what I thought, yeah.
It's hard to tell because only one little bubble comes up, so I sometimes miss who's speaking. But if there's anyone else, I'll give you like 5 more seconds. Okay, cool. Can you all still see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. And then your bubbles don't come into it, right? Your faces. I don't think so. All right, so I could post this question into the chat. I should have done that, I guess, while you all were speaking. So from the presentation, as well as from your personal life, from your professional life, from other presentations that you've seen, like from last month and things like that, which transit-related issues do you, see most important to you? Do you want to focus on? Do you see in your own daily life? And this is just like a brain dump. So if you want to go into the PowerPoint, you're absolutely more than welcome to just type in your thoughts here, blah, blah, blah. Or you can say it out loud and one of us can type it in for you. So this is like a total brain dump. Like there are absolutely no wrong answers, just whatever comes to your mind.
What?
I know. It's not school.
What's the question?
Oh, I think I posted into the chat, but maybe I didn't press send. Which transit-related issues do you see in your daily life? Which issues seem most important to you? And which issues do you want to focus on? So just basically identifying like which issue, if we're going to organize a campaign around transportation and mobility, what should we put our focus on? Like what should be our general goal? We'll look into solutions later. I'm seeing what time it was. But first, let's focus on which issues you're seeing.
Well, this is Joe Lynn. And I think the issues in my own personal life is the parking and traffic. I may change my thing from a bike to a small hybrid car because I don't really bike, but I know it's a real good way of transportation. And the thing that my concern with the public transportation is the connection from the suburbs to suburb to downtown, light rail stations and bus stations, within a mile of people's homes. in order to get it. I had a bus stop right next to me and they got rid of that. I don't know whether it'll come back or not. But I live like a mile from the light rail. So when I was going out more, I would take light rail, especially to other places besides grocery shopping and, you know, stuff like that.
How about affordability for the poor and the marginalized people that need to take public transportation?
Good one.
Perfect. I'm recording all of these things into the notes. I really appreciate all your feedback.
I would like to see more, just a much beefier public transportation system. I know Kevin last month was just talking about how there was a plan to do an RDT line. I think it was in Aurora near that huge hospital out there, which I can't remember right now. And there was so much blowback on it that they didn't put it where it would have been actually the most effective because their community didn't want it. And I just think that there really needs to be more buses, more RDT, buses or trains to the mountains. I mean, if Denver is going to continue growing like it is, we can't really accommodate, you know, a million more cars on the road. So that's my issue.
Anschutz Medical Center.
Yes, that's what it was.
And
The
the
R line.
the
Yeah.
bus route is a 20-minute walk from
Right.
the bus to Anschutz instead of a 2-minute.
Yep.
I think this is in part captured by what everyone has said about cars, but I lived in LA before this, and it's just sort of frustrating and scary to know that I can't live where I need to be and work without, you know, compromising my own future health every time I come over the hill or come down from the mountains and look at the big gray cloud over the city.
Electrification of buses and any other kind of transports, taxis and all vehicles that are federal, I guess, like you had mentioned that before.
Would be nice for a system, this is Jill Lynn again, of actually not owning a private car, but being able to dial up one that would come, you know, to you and take you where you needed to go, and then you drop it off again. Sort of like the bike sharing. I think they have that kind of thing, eco car or something.
There was a car to go, I think it was car to go, and I think they left Denver last year sometime. I don't think they were doing well enough financially, and I haven't heard any updates on anything that's going to replace it. But I used to see the cars around my neighborhood quite a bit, and I had a friend who had a membership and used it all the time.
That's a great point too, that we lost our public bike system, you know, a year and a half ago, more than that. And I haven't heard anything about a replacement.
Oh, the B-cycle you're talking?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was something, I can't remember. I did hear something that there was some sort of plan. And of course, there's been a couple of the private companies that have brought their bikes in that don't use the stations, but they're not, and I don't know what the latest is. They're not necessarily reliable because they're private companies. So you don't know what they're going to do 1 month from the next. But you know, there was a point where we saw the scooters everywhere, and I don't see them as much anymore on the streets. And I don't see some of those bikes left as much anymore either. And I don't know if it has to do with the pandemic or if it's something else.
I
Well,
mean,
there used to be a lot of scooters.
Yeah.
And those create a hazard too. You know, when they're blocking the sidewalk, it feels like that fight has been lost more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's definitely become an issue where, you know, people are just leaving them wherever and they're not, you know, if they're leaving them in a right of way, especially.
Yeah, it seems to me that bikes are more for exercise than transportation. Because, you know, they're out on the bike paths whizzing by you and not calling out when they pass. And
Unless you're a messenger service.
yeah, good point there too. Yeah.
So it's funny because there's a YouTube channel I follow, and there's a guy who lives in, I think, Amsterdam, which most people get around on bikes. And he talks about all the time how he does not consider himself a cyclist, because cyclists are people who wear like spandex and, you know, they get out and they for exercise and stuff. And he's like, you know, 75-80% of the population in Amsterdam gets around by bike, but none of them call themselves cyclists. It's just what they do to get around. Well, part of it is their bike infrastructure is so good that it's just second nature to them. You know, they're able to get out and they're not worried about having to compete with cars. You know, it's just comfortable to do it.
Someone mentioned telepresence. We could incentivize that. Staying home 3 days, working 2, you know.
Something like that, yeah.
The heavier vehicles are going to be better off using hydrogen fuel cells. Well, they are. That's the truth. Those electric vehicles don't keep the power to climb mountains and stuff. They just don't. So you're going to have to do the hydrogen fuel cells for big trucks, buses, that kind of thing, especially if you're changing altitude.
Somebody had mentioned cars and going up to the mountains and public transportation to and from the mountain areas. And I think that's kind of a good idea too. I haven't been up to the mountains for quite a while, but I just see all the traffic jams. Yeah, I think somebody just commented on the COVID going back to private cars, and I agree with that too. I'd be scared for public transportation at this point.
These are so many great points, and I'm trying to capture everything that you all are sharing out loud as well as what's in the chat. I guess my original thought for this was that after now we're seeing it all laid out on this, we could go in and kind of figure out which of these issues, you know, seem most pertinent to address, and or like which seem like we'd be able to actually address and like have capacity for, and maybe put like do like a vote on like just like a low-key vote, and putting the little stars next to the ones that we see as like the most concerning problems. Does that sound like it would be a reasonable use of time, or do you think it would be a better use of time to continue to brainstorm? What are you all feeling?
I think let's try to rein this list in a little bit. I think this is a pretty good assessment of urban transportation issues right now.
Yeah, me too. I second that.
I would think, yeah, let's bring it down to 3 or 4. Sounds good. I liked the comment on the Amsterdam. The only thing is, here in America, we built the cities for the cars.
Mm-hmm.
Amsterdam, they started out with the bicycles.
Oh, that's not true. That actually changed in the 70s.
Oh,
Amsterdam didn't, they looked a lot like Denver in the 50s.
Yeah, you can go back and see old photos of what Amsterdam looked like in the 70s, and it looks very similar to what we have here today. So theirs was a very deliberate and controversial change at the time, and
Yeah.
it took a while to evolve.
I wanted to add one more to the panel, to the page. There's a big equity issue. A lot of the neighborhoods that poor and minority neighborhoods, they have the really the worst infrastructure and the worst safety record, and they're also the most transit dependent. They're most likely to not own a car, yet they don't even have sidewalks. So
Yeah.
I think that's something that really needs attention.
Yeah, there is a thing with the sidewalks where there is a program now where we're supposed to be doing maintenance on Denver sidewalks, and we're like decades behind. And part of it is it's really up to it. So sidewalks are basically an owner's responsibility. And so the city will eventually probably, but they're going like neighborhood to neighborhood, and they might eventually get to your neighborhood and say, hey, we noticed you have a broken sidewalk. We would like you to fix it. And they'll either have you do it yourself, or they might recommend a contractor, or they'll do it and they'll bill you. But they are years behind on that. And like David said, there are neighborhoods, especially in North Denver, that have no sidewalks at all. And so, a lot of those people, it's a little hairy to get around.
Yeah. I know that they came around my neighborhood here in Southeast Denver, Colorado, Yale area, and put in the curb ramps, I should say, for accessibility.
Yeah, that happened in my neighborhood too a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think one of the questions for this committee is like, that's a great example of something that is probably more achievable, but is ultimately a patch job on a broken transportation system versus something like, encouraging major redevelopment or major reconception of how we use streets, which is, has a much larger impact, but, as David pointed out, would cause an enormous amount of pushback to redesign an entire city. So, the question is, what is our appetite and what is our capability?
I'm a big believer in follow the money. If there's funding available for sidewalks and buses and bike lanes, then it'll happen. But if all that money goes to highways, then people will drive.
Yeah.
So if we can work on the budget, if we could work on maybe legislation that pushes funding in that direction, I think that could affect a lot of these things.
And the other thing I would add is there are things that are going on right now which you guys can help push for. Like I know one of the things that I think that there might even be at meetings tonight, I'm not sure, but talking about bus rapid transit on Federal Boulevard. And if you know anything about Federal Boulevard, it is one of the most dangerous streets in Denver. It is where we have the most deaths. I know we've had several this year, most pedestrian deaths. And it's also along some of the neighborhoods that have some of those that have been underserved. And so there's currently a proposal for a BRT on Federal. This is part of the Denver Moves, but the last I heard is that they're only planning on going up to 20th Street with a dedicated lane, and north of that they would not have a dedicated lane. It would just they'd have to compete with traffic again. So that is something that, like, if you live in that area, that you can reach out to your council person and let them know that that's something that's important to you. Those are the things, or your RTD member. Those are things that they really need to hear, that those are things you support, because they do get a lot of pushback from people who just want to keep driving and want to, have 3 lanes on Federal for cars.
So I originally was thinking of doing stars, but I think it would just be cleaning if we all go in and put like a plus sign next to the ones that we're most passionate about. And try to limit it to like 3 to 5 at way max, just so that there's not plus signs on all of them, because then it won't really narrow us down any further. And if you have trouble with the PowerPoint, you could also post your top 3 into the chat.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can get in to do it.
Can you see the screen on it? Can you at least like visualize my screen right now, or?
I can see your screen, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So then at the bottom of your Zoom page, you should be able to click where it says chat and then open it up, and you can just type in the 3 that were most that stood out to you into the chat box, and then I could add a plus sign for you.
Jessica, just 3.
You can, if
It's so hard. Yeah.
It's very hard. You know, it is a smaller group of us, so if you feel like you would better capture it with 5, that's fine too.
Okay.
I was kind of wondering, like when I saw parking and traffic, I know that's a big reason I don't use a car, but that's like we're marking. I'm kind of confused as to just like what we're really supposed to be marking. Are these like problems that we think with the current system? Is that it?
Yeah, exactly. So problems with the current system. I think that the parking and transit or traffic post right there was from like someone who mostly uses their car. So problems with parking and traffic was really pertinent to them. But if your larger picture focuses are on the other things, then maybe put the plus sign onto the like larger picture things, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying.
Does like 1 more minute sound good for everyone?
Jessica? It's Heidi. Under sidewalk maintenance, I just realized like wintertime problems with having sidewalks plowed. Could we add that onto the sidewalk maintenance subject?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
I'm just trying to add the little pluses from the chat, so it's taking a moment. Okay, I think that I was able to convert everyone's stars, but I definitely probably missed a few. But I think that I at least got the gist of it all. So looking at the screen, it definitely looks like there's a lot of support for safety and normalizing public transit, electrifying mass public transit, federal vehicles and taxis, creating safe streets that are safe for biking and walking, safe, convenient, affordable transportation options, transit to and from mountain areas, lack of funding for transport infrastructure aside from highways, zoning and development patterns that require cars, lack of transit connections between suburbs and stops that are close to homes and places where you need to be, having more frequent buses and feeling safe walking or biking. That was actually bike lanes and micro mobility options, equity, sidewalk maintenance, and funding. So, oh, perfect.
Yep.
Somebody's copying them.
Yeah, let's see if we can start sort of putting these into categories and see if anything jumps out.
Thank you so much for doing that. All right. So yeah, let's I'm gonna create like a public transit type section. Andrew, would you want to create like a biking walking section? See what are some of the other themes? Michaela, would you be able to get like all the miscellaneous things that don't fit into those two categories?
Safety and funding would be miscellaneous, I guess.
Yeah, perfect.
Look at this power of collaboration. Who needs meeting in person when we have this?
Where did you want me to move those ones again, Jessica?
Just to like a miscellaneous, unless you see like a good category that stands out on its own. Cool. All right, so I see with public transit, there's the conversation of it being convenient and located where it needs to be, of it being affordable, of it being safe, of electrifying public transit, and normalizing it, so like creating a culture that supports public transit. And then with walking and biking, I see like a lack of routes, a lack of alternative transportation options, equity issues, lack of funding as sort of the main things that stand out. And I think this is a really good place to keep it for further discussion. And then maybe shift right now to thinking about, with this in mind, with these like issues that we've identified, brainstorming some possible solutions. So if we want to move on to the next slide, should all, I think, be able to type into the different sticky notes. And so type out whatever solutions come to mind that either were previously discussed that excite you, or like just think about like what your ideal transportation and mobility future would look like. And feel free to write on multiple sticky notes, and I could also add more if you don't feel this is enough. Oh yeah, and then of course add it into the chat, and I'll put those comments into the slides. All right, and then perfect. I see some folks moving the stars to the solutions that most excite them. So feel free to do that, or you can write it into the chat. And also if you have more ideas, feel free to keep adding some more solutions. then Amy, if you can unmute yourself, would you be able to share a little bit more about what's happening in the House at the federal Senate level, and if there were specific projects that you were thinking about in terms of setting more precise benchmarks?
Well, if you're interested in the House report, Joe Negus from Boulder was on that committee, and a lot of the recommendations for the transportation section, which is pretty long, it has a lot of different areas. They're working on that. They're putting bills together on that. So they're using that House Select Committee report and the Senate to come up with different pieces of legislation on all areas, on all sectors.
And
So
is this
agriculture, you name it.
Is this at the state or the federal level?
Federal level. Yeah, they came to Boulder to initiate the whole thing. It was originally bipartisan. I don't know how it is now, but it doesn't matter. The report is out. But underlying all of the suggestions and recommendations and solutions is that equity and environmental justice, peace, everything, all projects have to have that as the basis. So create jobs, which I don't think we put in here, did we?
No. I'm trying to add more sticky notes. Hopefully you can all see them. There you go. Oh, thanks, Cindy, for adding the star. Sunny, would you like me to add a sticky that says like supporting or being involved in the transportation bill at the state level? That you see have something in the chat.
I haven't seen the bill yet, so whether or not we're supporting it depends upon the specific language contained within the bill. And since the legislation is delayed this year due to COVID until February 16th, we might not know till maybe March. So hold off.
All right, and then okay, perfect. And then okay, so I see if oh my gosh, sorry, I'm not trying to read through the chat. But it definitely looks like there's a lot of stars on educating the public on the relationship between transportation and climate change and the need to reduce vehicle miles driven. Free transit for our elders, our low income communities, women and children, free electric public transit, transit oriented neighborhood planning, no car streets, complete biking and walking paths, protected bike lanes, pressuring government to follow the plans they have committed to, reducing speed limits, telecommuting mandates on companies, and moratoriums on highway expansion. I think this is a really great list, and then we can add this onto our solutions page. Let me see if I can. All right. And I think this is really just the start of this conversation. You know, a lot of these solutions and these issues interrelate, and I think that it's also you know, reasonable to have a comprehensive goal of, like, if you're, for instance, doing transit oriented neighborhood development, you need to increase public transit as well as having biking and walking paths or no car streets. So definitely a lot of them are related, and I think it could be useful to like try to compound some of these goals. And then we are going to be starting a new committee on transportation and mobility, and this has been like so influential in helping us to figure out where everyone's interests are, and we really want you all to be a part of it. And if there's anyone that you know that's interested in transportation and mobility issues and solutions within the Denver metro area, this is going to be like a Denver centered campaign. But also, like, for instance, like we were talking about connections to the mountains or to other areas, like there are other areas that we could connect to as well, or we could work at like the state level. So there are different options, and we're going to send you out within this week a survey that is going to just do a check-in to see what sort of, you know, kind of like a little bit of a recap of this, like what sort of issues and things you're most passionate about. If you're interested in joining our campaign, either in a leadership role or just, you know, as a member to support what we're doing. And also just to see like what capacity people have and the level of excitement for this work. I guess before we move on to close, oh yeah, that's a really great point that it intersects with the idea of urban community food gardens. Yeah, totally. Is there any other questions that folks have or comments that they'd like to add, excitements, anything like that? All right. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I just had one thing. I just think it's exciting and encouraging that the city and organizations are starting to talk about this in a serious way. I mean, of course, it should have been done a long time ago, but I think we're really at a you know, positive turning point. There's so much interest in the climate right now, and there's so many people that have great ideas and want to make it work. So I think that's we just got to go with it and run with it, and take all this positive energy and make it work.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's really great that we have a government that actually really supports this, or at least, you know, they have plans in place to support it. I'm going to copy this onto the transportation page, but Liz, I'd love to pass this on to you to share about what our needs are to push this campaign and other actions forward. If you're here, I think that you're still here. there you are.
Yes, I'm here.
Hmm.
I'm kind of brain dead. I really like the way things have come together. And there's so many things that intersect in the whole thing of building infrastructure and equity and, dealing with climate together is just really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And then here I can post it into the chat. It's hard to navigate both of these at the same time. Nope, it didn't send. I was hoping you'd be able to share about our donation links and things like that.
Yes, with a little bit of help from Sunny. My take on these wonderful meetings that we have each month is that I support them by providing a monthly $20 donation. And whatever you feel called to do, I encourage you to do that, because our support is just one of those infrastructure things for all of this moving forward. And I thank you. And Sunny, can you put the link in our chat? Are you here?
I think I just, hopefully that should go through.
Jessica
Okay.
already put it in the chat. I didn't have the link, so I'm glad she's on the ball. Thanks, Jessica.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you. This is great.
All right. And then I want to, bring into your attention some upcoming events and actions. Some by 350 Denver, 350 Colorado, and others by other great orgs. So tomorrow and Thursday is Transit Equity Day. It's held every year on February 4th in commemoration of Rosa Parks. It's her birthday. And it's basically a time to come together and recognize public transit as a civil right and as a strategy to combat climate change. So I'll link the events into the chat as well. But both of those days, there are a bunch of different organizations and unions coming together and hosting their own separate events, but then they're also having on both of those days. On tomorrow, it's from 1 to 5, and Thursday, it's from 9 to 1. There's like a hearing, testimony, panel discussions, all about transportation and how it intersects with justice and equity. And then at the end of this month, on the 25th, it's Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m., the state is hosting another transportation rule information and listening session. So they had one, I think it was last week. And they're really looking for input and ideas on what we'd like to see in their transportation plan. This is a time where we could come and introduce some of the things that we're thinking about, and you could sign up in advance to give a 2-minute public comment. And even when I was there last week, there were a couple of people who literally just that day were like, messaged the facilitators and asked if they had time to give a 2-minute public comment. So that could be an opportunity if you're really passionate about this topic. And then I'm going to pass it on to Micaela.
In honor of Black History Month, I thought it would be a good idea for the team for 350 Denver team to host another webinar, and that is in honor of Black History Month and what it means to be a good ally and to have allyship. And so I will be hosting that and getting the information out to you soon by the end of the week. I will be bringing on some Indigenous and Black speakers to help speak about that and what it means to be a good ally and what that looks like. So be on the lookout for that for those of you that are interested in that. And then something else I'm also working on and just started, some cool work I also do is I own a youth organization and an all women's organization, Women from the Mountain and International Indigenous Youth Council. And then I do environmental justice and social justice work with Spirit of the Sun. And we started a campaign. We launched it last week, and the campaign name is Relearn to Reimagine. And so let's relearn to reimagine what our planet would look like when those harming us are held accountable for those actions. And the reason why we started this campaign was, as most of you guys know, Biden last week is let out that it's expected to take executive action to pause all oil and gas leasing on public lands. But we want to call on all of our state leaders to join in taking action on climate justice as well. By joining, I'm going to put the petition here into the chat. But by signing this petition, it's to encourage your state representatives to hold corporations accountable according to the personhood they are afforded to do harm to our BIPOC communities. And environmental racism and violence is rampant in our Colorado communities, and we must come together to address these injustices. So by protecting people over polluters takes courage and humility to recognize the reality harming us all. If extractive corporations are given the privilege, they sacrifice their neighbors, they must also be held as moral corporate people, held for public endangerment and environmental crimes committed against the public land. And some may ask, what is environmental racism and how can we fight against it? Environmental racism is a form of systematic racism. Our BIPOC communities are disproportionately harmed by pollution and climate change. And unfortunately, we can identify many instances of environmental racism close to home here in what we now call Colorado. So I will now go ahead and drop that link into the chat. You can all please sign it. That would be beautiful. And then lastly, next month, we will be hosting our meeting on line 3, and I will actually be on the front lines on line 3. And what is line 3? For those of you that don't know, line 3 is a proposed pipeline expansion to bring nearly 1 million barrels of tar sands per day from Alberta, Canada to Superior, Wisconsin. So it was proposed in 2014 by Enbridge, which is a Canadian pipeline company responsible for the largest inland oil spill in the US. Enbridge seeks to build a new pipeline corridor through the untouched wetlands in the treaty territory of the Anishinaabe people and through the Mississippi River headwaters to the shore lake of Superior. So I will be going down there to stand with my relatives, my brothers and sisters, to help put a stop to this pipeline, just as we did for DAPL. The construction is rampant right now. They are working it looks like almost all hours to really get this pipeline done. So I will be hosting our meeting from there next month. So please look out for that and information on that. And I hope to see all of you join us. And if you guys have any questions, please let me know, or I'll drop my email in the chat. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Michaela.
Thanks so much. And thank you, everyone. Sorry, I'm an hour ahead. So earlier I was like, oh my gosh, it's like an hour later than I thought it was going to be. It's about to end. So I was trying to breeze through the solutions process. And then I realized I'm just an hour ahead. So I apologize if that seems like a sudden shift away from that. But we really, really appreciated all of your feedback. All of the issues that you brought up are so important. All of the solutions that you all came up with are also so important. And we really want all of your voices to be there as we move this forward. If you're interested in being involved, please put your email in the chat, and we will also send up that follow-up survey, but that way we have your email already in case if you don't receive the survey or anything. We just want to make sure that we're hearing from you all. The event on 225. Thanks for that question. It is it's mixed. It's like 2 hours long, and how it was like the first maybe hour 15 minutes of it. They had different organizations that they invited to come and speak about what they thought should be included in their plans. And then the last like 45 minutes maybe was where people, actually some folks from 350 Colorado I recognized there, to give a 2-minute public comment. But it is definitely like they're really asking for people's input, so definitely recommend you going.
So I see that it's also, they have like recorded ones that already happened, right? So would it be live, or are you like watching something that already happened?
It'd be live, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Thanks everyone for putting your emails in the chat. It was really a pleasure to chat with you all about these topics, and a really great opportunity for me to learn a lot about it. It's not something that I've previously dived a lot into, and it's something that now I'm super excited and passionate about. So thanks for being on this journey with me. And if anyone has any last things to say, I'll give it another minute for people to share their thoughts.
I just wanted to say that I know at the start of the session I said I only had like 30 minutes because I wanted to go eat dinner and have some of my time, but I was really intrigued by just having so many cool people who you know believe in similar things. And then also I was just super inspired when I saw like the picture of like what a city might look like um, if we made some of these changes. So it definitely touched me and like activated me and made me actually want to stay for the whole thing. So yeah, I just want to say that.
Nice.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I look forward to chatting with you some more. And thank you so much to everyone that was on the team. This was definitely, even though I was the facilitator, I was absolutely not the only person who put in work into this presentation and into the research. So thank you so much, Kim and Andrew and Michaela, your support through all of this and all the research and thoughts that you were like essential to making this all happen. Yeah.
Not true. Jessica killed
Yeah.
it. She's gonna
Seriously.
solve transportation in Denver all
Seriously.
by herself.
Yep.
Jessica's amazing. So kudos to Jessica. Thank you so much.
Yep. It was great, Jessica. Thank you.
All right. Have a beautiful rest of your evening, everyone. And I hope that you have a good rest and spend some time with folks that you love. All right, bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Fantastic.
Night, everybody.